Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Been using this Stihl FG2. This is a file guide system, works fantastic, eliminates all the errors. We've been playing around with 10 degrees tilt, so we've got a Stihl chain, an RS chain, full chisel, and we set the file deliberately a little bit too low, right down the bottom of the gullet. And if we look at the first picture up in the top left hand corner, this will show you no tilt, but you can see there's still quite a bit of hook on it. This is the problem if you set the file down too low. So you can certainly see that there's quite a little bit of hook on it. Now the second picture will show you 10 degrees tilt, but it's still got a little bit too much hook for my liking. We have a look at the picture here. So that's what that looks like. Not a huge deal of difference because the file's too low down. Now, the third picture, we corrected the file height because you can adjust it on the knob on the file guide. And we set it a little bit higher. So if we have a first look at the other picture, this is the correct file depth and this has got no tilt. And as you can see, the hook has been dramatically reduced by having the file at the right spot. The second picture is 10 degrees downward tilt. And as you can see, there is a lot less hook. So definitely 10 degrees downward tilt reduces the hook. Now, the other thing is, and it's interesting when you compare one chain against another chain or one manufacturer against another. And if we have a look in the top left-hand corner again, you got the Hurricane chain. And we'll show you 10 degrees downward tilt. So that's 10 degrees downward tilt. And you can see it's certainly got a lot of reduced hook on that. Have a look at the next picture. The next picture there shows no tilt. So you can see the difference between 10 degrees tilt and no tilt. So definitely the 10 degrees makes a big difference there. Now, still don't recommend the 10 degrees downward tilt anymore. Now they've brought this out and this has 10 degrees tilt on it. So for those, that is 10 degrees tilt. That's what it looks like. And if we adjust it, that's horizontal. So that's your horizontal. That's your 10 degrees downward tilt. I definitely remember. Now, I think one of the reasons it's still abandoned the 10 degrees downward tilt because people stuff up filing their chains normally. 10 degrees downward tilt, and even I was guilty of it. I was filing more than 10 degrees downward tilt. I was even guilty of filing probably almost 20 degrees downward tilt. I'd be filing on the tie straps. When you freehand file, you have to be exceptionally good at it. And if you're going to do 10 degrees downward tilt, this is the only mechanism that's going to repeat 10 degrees downward tilt because there's no movement. So if you're just freehand filing, you could be filing 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 15 degrees, 20 degrees. You could be all over the place. And this is what happens. So definitely 10 degrees downward tilt changes the geometry on the side plate, the little point. Still no longer recommended. I can understand that because it's too much trouble and there's very little gain from 10 degrees downward tilt. But if you've got too much hook, and instead of using tilt, make sure that you're not filing too deep into the gullet, because if you file too deep into the tooth, you'll get a little bit of hook. A little bit of hook is okay, long as you don't have too much hook. Now this is a 5.2 millimeter file, so what a lot of people like to do is use a 5.5 millimeter file, and when the tooth wears halfway down, then swap to a 5.2 millimeter file. So still recommend 5.2 millimeter file for their 3/8 chain. Hurricane recommend 5.5 millimeter file. Archer, Carlton, and all these other companies out there, Oregon, they all recommend either 5.5 millimeter or 5.2. So yeah, it depends. And a lot of people deliberately use 5.5mm file on 3/8 standard chain to reduce the hook. And then as the chain wears down, they swap to the 5.2. And that's not a bad idea anyway. But those pictures that you saw, the first one's a little bit too much hook there. The file too deep into the gullet. You need to bring that file up a little bit. So if you're filing your standard RS chain and it looks like those Stihl pictures, we'll just put another one back up here. So if yours is looking like this, your file is a little bit too deep inside, sitting too low in the gullet. I did remember reading, I think Stihl recommend 25% that the file sits above the tooth now. It used to be around 20%, but I'm sure Stihl recommending 25% above. Anyway, between 20% and 25 depends on how much hook that you've got. So if you've got too much hook, try and bring your file up a little bit, even if you're doing freehand hand filing. But certainly on something like this is almost identical to the Granberg, and you've got the adjustment knob on here. And if you look on top, you'll see, we'll just see whether we can see that there, we'll zoom in. You got your 0 degrees in the middle and your 10 degrees either side. And then on here, you got your 30 degrees or 35. There's no 25. Oh, there is a 25 degree on there. It's just that they can't put it on there. You can feel it on the little indentations. They're spaced at 5 degree intervals left and right. So, in conclusion, the 10 degrees downward tilt to me these days is probably not required. You can see by a lot of those photos there that you'll get into more trouble filing deeper down into the gullet than using the 10 degrees downward tilt. So if you really want to file properly and not run into trouble, don't file deep into the gullet. Otherwise you'll end up with too much hook. Pretty much that simple. The only other thing that's interesting, I was looking at this chain brand new, and I suspect, and someone else was talking, and we sort of suspect that some of the chains may have a little bit of tilt manufactured from brand new. Little bit difficult, because when I played around with this and I used the 10 degrees downward tilt, it seemed to match the profile. I'll just have there's another picture there. If you have a look at this picture, you can see that normally if you drop your file down and do a 10 degrees downward tilt, you'll find out that there's a little bit of a gap at the back of the tooth, and you start to file the front of the tooth. That's the whole idea of the 10 degrees downward tilt. And in this picture, you can clearly see that it's not the case. It's filing fairly even. So I suspect there's a little bit of tilt. It may not be 10%, it could be 5%, it could be 7%. So I wouldn't be surprised. And then someone mentioned to me that they may be having 2 grinds on a tooth, but I wouldn't think that a manufacturer would have 2 grinds per tooth. You'd think it'd be just 1 grind, and I suspect, looking at the profile of a brand new chain, the Stihl chain, the RS, there's a little tiny bit of tilt in there. So I suspect that. I can't confirm it, but I suspect it is, just by looking at the grinding marks on a brand new tooth and lining this up with the 10 degrees. It seems to match the RS chain pretty good. That indicates to me that there is some tilt there. Anyway, it's up to you whether you want to use 10 degrees downward tilt. If you don't use it, it's not going to probably affect your cutting that much. Only thing that if you look at the side of the tooth and there's too much hook in there, either you got the wrong file or the file is too deep into the gullet, which will cause a bit of hook. And you can eliminate most of your problems by making sure that the file sits 20 to 25% above the tooth, and that will reduce the hook. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.